Hi everybody, it's Deb from the Outdoor Education Center again here in Blue Water, and today on this beautiful day I'm here with Dr. Heather Reid. Heather's a medical doctor with Survival in the Bush, and she's here to talk about heat loss and how we can prevent that. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Deb.
So tell me, it's a hot day today, we're not so concerned, we're actually probably wanting to lose a little bit of heat, but we're coming into that time of year where fall is coming and winter, and I think the culture right now is we're trying to convince people to spend more time outside so that we can get some fresh air and enjoy the outdoors, but also do that social distancing thing.
Absolutely.
So being outside is important. So how are we going to stay comfortable as the temperatures cool down? What do we need to know about heat loss?
Excellent. The first thing I think we should talk about is conduction. So conduction is when you're touching something and you're losing heat to that material. Sometimes you'll notice this, especially in the winter, if you touch something metal, you'll find that it's very cold compared to the ambient temperature because you're losing a lot more heat.
So no licking metal poles.
Don't lick the metal pole for sure. You'll get stuck. But today we're sitting on these benches. It's quite lovely. We're off the ground. You're not losing any heat to the ground. That might be advantageous on a hot sunny day to sort of lie in the cool shaded grass, might feel really good. But if it was November and it's a bit cool and you're cold already, to lie directly on the ground, you would lose quite a bit of heat just to the ground. So conduction is really important. So we say get off the ground, sit on a bench, sit on a blanket, get away from metal things that are leaching the heat away from you. Don't lean against a cold building or you will get cold yourself. So definitely the first method of heat loss is considered to be conduction.
Okay, and I notice working with students outside that sometimes when they're cold they just want to sit and huddle and they don't want to get up and move around, but they might be sitting on something that's actually making them colder. So having thermarests below you when you're in your tent or something like that, or a blanket to sit on at the hockey arena, all of those things are important if we get to do that someday soon. What about, we had that famous quote with Justin Trudeau talking about breathing moistly or speaking moistly. So I think from our respiration, we probably lose a bit of heat.
Absolutely. So we breathe the ambient temperature. So on a day like today, we're not really thinking about it. But if it's quite cold, and I can remember living up in Kapuskasing, and it was so cold when you breathe, it hurt. It hurt your lungs. And so what we can do to stop the heat loss through your respiration is actually just to put a scarf over your face. Or sometimes we take our hoods and we put them up and they have that fur around. That can trap air near your face and sort of pre-warm it before you breathe it in, which makes it a lot more comfortable. Sometimes people will get a hot cup of cocoa and breathe over it, and that feels really nice on a cold day. So for sure you can lose a lot of heat through breathing, and you can stop that on a cold day with some of those measures.
Okay, great. I know when I was in the Arctic, people had the fur collar around their hoods, and they spoke about that the natural fur actually kind of drew the breath away, and that would freeze the droplets around their hoods so that it didn't freeze on their face, and that helped keep their face protected too.
Absolutely.
So.
And some of the there are certain furs that actually won't accumulate frost on them.
Oh, cool.
Some of the natural furs. So that's some of the natural fibers they use.
Okay. Well, what about just wearing layers? What does that protect us from?
Absolutely. So we're always radiating heat to our environment. So our body temperature is about 37.6 degrees. So you're radiating heat to the environment. So although it feels a bit warm today, it's still only 20, 25 degrees. So we're radiating heat to our environment, and you can stop that loss by adding layers. It's really important that between your layers you have a little air pocket. So we talk about loose clothing is actually keeps you a little bit warmer because air is a great insulator. So having a little bit of loose clothing is great. So if you're too hot on a day like today, shed some layers. If you're a little bit cool, then add some on. Sometimes we'll notice that you'll hear that talking about losing a lot of heat from your head. That comes old data that comes from a study where they covered people up except for their heads. And of course, if you think about it, if you don't cover your head, you will lose heat there because it's still radiating to the environment. However, a hat is a great way to keep everything nice and warm and toasty, and there's lots of great options today.
Okay, great. So there's 5 methods. We've talked about conduction, respiration, and radiation. So what's next?
So convection is the other one that we can stop with our clothing. So convection is the heat loss through the wind. So today's not too windy of a day, but if you think about a really blustery, cold November day, if you're trying to take your students outside, you'll notice they're huddled against the wind. And so the wind is very effective at getting rid of your heat. So in the summer, we put on a fan because we're hot, but in the winter or in a cooler time, we'll sit behind a wind block, perhaps some trees, perhaps you'll put on a wind breaker, some sort of clothing that stops the wind, and you'll find that you'll be more comfortable. And if you're hot in the summer, you can go for a dip in the lake, and your wet skin, the convection will certainly take your heat away very quickly. So it's a very effective tool, and it's one that we need to always consider. So if you're out and you're cold, think about whether you're losing heat to the wind.
Okay, and the last one?
The last one is perspiration and evaporation.
Oh,
so this is, in science we talk about heat loss and transpiration and things like that. And so we're always perspiring a little bit, and some days it's more noticeable than others. But you will notice that your clothing, especially if you're working hard in the outdoors, does get a bit damp. So sometimes by the end of a day outdoors, even when we haven't been working so hard, we notice we're a bit damp. Just in our clothes from just sweating, and that evaporative process takes heat with it. So before you go to bed in your shelter, or before you go to bed in your tent or your campsite, we always say put on dry pajamas, dry long johns, whatever you want to use, because you're going to be a lot more comfortable when you're dry. So if we have people who are hypothermic in an outdoor situation, often we actually change their clothes. So we address all 5 of these methods of heat loss: conduction, convection, radiation, perspiration, evaporation by changing your clothes, and then radiation by putting on lots of layers. So you want to make sure you're nice and dry and warm, and that makes a big difference.
Okay, so then that kind of speaks to what to have in your first aid kit too, and I'm sure Gino and Jennifer will do another session on that. Thank you so much for being with us
Thank you
today.
for
That was very
hosting us.
informative.
Okay, take
that's
care.
Wonderful, thank you.
Bye.
GoPro, stop recording.